is multi-talented with multi-subjects, and but baseball holds him together and was his first project upon retirement, right?
Well, yeah, COVID forced me into it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is Mrs. Frank.
That's my wife, Doris.
Also known as Doris, and there's kind of like Jimmy and me. They're rarely seen together.
We'll call you Doris. I like Doris. Doris is fine.
Yeah. So it's all good. So blaze on, Frank.
Thank you, Karen.
Can I ask just a quick question before you start?
Yeah.
When it says North Carolina players, do you have to be born and raised
Yes.
here? Or
Born.
not just
Born.
not played?
Not raised. Born.
Okay.
Yeah.
But not necessarily played here in college? Or?
No. If you were born here, you made the book.
Okay.
Test. You already know this, so keep. Shh. Who's that?
Mickey Mantle.
Mickey
What?
Mantle.
There you go. Okay, so we got some baseball fans. Okay, we got some. Yeah, he was. I'm from New York too. I grew up in Brooklyn in the 50s, and of course Mickey Mantle was my hero growing up. So, but yeah, baseball has always been one of the constants in my life. A lot of things have changed through life, but baseball has always been there for me. And as I noted, when COVID struck, I had retired. I'm an old newspaper guy. Also worked for the Coastal Federation at the end of my career. But when I retired, this idea of, during my reporting days, I worked for the Winston-Salem Journal for 23 years in North Carolina, and got to meet people like Ernie Shore, who Ernie was from Davie County, and he played with Babe Ruth when Ruth was a pitcher on the Red Sox. And in Ruth's second year, he walked the first batter, got upset with the umpire, a guy named Brick Owens. And Brick got his nickname because back in those days, now we're talking about 1918, 1916, back in those days it was a pretty rowdy game. Gamblers roamed the stadiums, with the fans. It was considered unsavory. In fact, women were not encouraged to go to baseball games. There was a lot of cussing and gambling. And Brick was an old umpire, had been an umpire for 20 years by the time he met Babe. A call upset some fans, and someone threw a brick and hit him in the head, and Brick got up. They cleaned the wound and continued on, and he got the nickname Brick. So when Babe got upset after walking the first guy, he took a swing at Brick. Brick swung back, laid the Babe on his butt, and threw him out of the game. Ernie was sitting on the bench. He was a pitcher, sitting on the bench. It was the second game of a doubleheader at Fenway Park, and he had expected to have an afternoon of leisure. He wasn't expected to pitch. The manager says, "You got to finish this game. Just try to get out of this." Well, the batter who had walked tried to steal second. They threw him out, and Ernie retired the next 26 batters. And for a time it was considered a perfect game, but it wasn't, because the first batter did walk. So he's credited in the record books as having a combined no-hitter with Babe Ruth. But I had met Ernie. He was a longtime sheriff. When he retired, he became sheriff of Forsyth County, and I had met Ernie, along with people like Catfish Hunter and Gaylord Perry. And so through my reporting, I got to bump into these people. So when I retired, I said it'd be pretty nice to write a book on these folks. So COVID hit, and we were isolated for a year or so, and that's when I started on this. The book will be published. McFarland Publishers in Ashe County will publish it sometime the end of this year or the first of next year. I'm not really clear, but it will include all 501 North Carolina natives who made the major leagues. And you had to qualify, you just had to be born in North Carolina. So you have people like Luke Appling, Old Aches and Pains, who is from High Point, born in High Point, but the family moved to Georgia, to Atlanta, when he was an infant. So he's actually recognized as a Georgian, and it wasn't until last year that the North Carolina Sports Hall of Fame inducted him. But he made the book, and Luke is the best defensive player in white baseball. And we'll talk about who I think is the best player to come out of North Carolina in a minute. And other people didn't make it. Vinegar Ben Mizell, who played baseball, was a pitcher of some note, but moved to Davie County, was a congressman, represented North Carolina for a number of years, and most people think he's a North Carolinian. He's not in the book, because he was born in Pennsylvania, and in fact, Vinegar Bend is the section of Pennsylvania where he was born, and that was his nickname. So he doesn't make the book. So there are 501. Of that 501, I got my notes here, so you'll see me look at these notes. 106 are from Eastern North Carolina. That, when we say Eastern North Carolina, that's the geographic term. East of the fall line, which is about where I-95 runs. So east of there, about 106 players from North Carolina. Coastal North Carolina, and that would be places that are adjacent to the ocean, one of our sounds or major coastal rivers, we have 27. 3 from Carteret County. So we'll start with them. The most recent is Lonnie Chesenhall. Lonnie played, he's a West Carteret grad. He played for the Cleveland Indians in the second decade of this century. Got into some trouble. He went to West, got a scholarship to the University of South Carolina, got caught breaking into dorm rooms to steal electronics, was tossed, ended up at Pitt Tech, because they had a pretty good baseball team, and he was drafted from Pitt Tech, and he had a pretty decent career for about 5 or 6 years with the Cleveland Indians. The other 2 are brothers, Ben and Whistling Jake Wade. Ben was the youngest of the 2. In fact, he was the last child of 11. He pitched for the Dodgers, was a so-so pitcher. He was prone to wildness, but it turned out his real talent was recognizing baseball talent. Baseball is harder than other sports because unlike basketball or football, you go from college right to the major leagues. It doesn't happen like that in baseball. So a good scout has to look at an 18-year-old kid and to project what this kid will be in the next 6 or 7 years. That's Chisenhall. There's Ben Wade. Ben was good at that. And it turned out when he retired, he became the Dodger scouting director for many years and was responsible for the talent in the, with the great Dodger teams of this century. Mike Piazza, Rick Sutcliffe, Oral Hershiser, Steve Sachs, Mike Scotia. He signed them. And he was responsible for those great Dodger teams. Before we talk about Jake, we got to talk about this fella, Johnny Allen. They're merged at the hip. Johnny Allen was an orphan, grew up in the orphanage in Thomasville in North Carolina. It was during the Depression. The daddy died. The mama couldn't care for the 3 children. There were 2 brothers and a daughter. She kept the infant daughter, and the 2 boys ended up in the orphanage. Johnny was what used to be called in baseball, and I hope I don't offend anyone, this was a real term, a red ass. And if we had such a team, if I were picking such a team in North Carolina, he'd be my starting pitcher. He was mean, he was ornery, he threw at people. In fact, you know, throwing at people back then, now we're talking about in the 30s when he pitched, late 20s and 30s, that was part of baseball. You know, no one got upset. But even he exceeded the unwritten rules and threw at so many that they suspended him. He got fined and suspended for 10 days, 10 games. His first game back, the first batter, guess what he did?
Threw at it.
He hit him. That was Johnny Allen. But he was a very fine pitcher. He was pitching for the Cleveland Indians in 1937 and had a 15-game winning streak. The record was 16, held by American League legends Walter Johnson and Lefty Grove. So he was going for a 16th win on the last game of the season in Detroit, 1937. Warming up to face him was Whistling Jake.
Wildwood.
Of Wildwood, that's right. Whistling Jake was a wild man. He couldn't control. He had pretty good fastball and curveball. He just couldn't control it. He also liked to whistle, and it just wasn't just whistling. He'd sit in front of a mirror for hours, whistling operas and show tunes. And when he was a rookie, his roommate said, you know, this guy's a real loony bird. I'm rooming with a real loony bird. And Jake said, I just like to keep my lips limber. And so he was better known for his whistling than his pitching. That season, it was his second season in the majors. He had won 6 games, lost 10, was walking almost a man an inning. So when Johnny Allen looked across, saw who was warming up, he figured, move over Lefty Grove and Walter Johnson. You can make room for me in the record books. Well, as often happens in baseball, Whistling Jake pitched the game of his life. He got into the 6th inning. He had a no-hitter. He had walked only one person in 6 innings. He normally would have walked 5 or 6, and was winning 1-0. No one thought that this would hold up, but it did. Now, he gave up 2 hits in the later innings, but he beat Johnny Allen 1-0, prevented Allen from entering the record books, and Johnny went on a tirade in the dressing room afterwards. Whistling Jake, you know, I'd like to report that was the turning point of his career. Well, that was the only good game he ever pitched in his life. He bounced around for a few more years, retired, came back to Morehead City. He grew up on a house on Fisher Street. There were 11 kids in the family. Lorene, the mama, everyone called her Lovey, would always win the prize at church every year for the largest family. He had a brother that some people called Dwight, but everyone in town called Croker. His daddy was a commercial fisherman. Wade came back to Morehead when he retired, got a job, trained himself to become an electrician, got a job at Cherry Point, and moved to Wildwood, and that's where he died. So those are the 3 from Carteret County. I'm often asked, who are the best players? This guy, in my opinion, is the best hitter to come out of North Carolina, Buck Leonard. He's in the Hall of Fame. He's one of 7.
What's his name?
Buck Leonard. Played for the Homestead Grays. Homestead Grays were the New York Yankees of the Negro Leagues. Won 9 consecutive pennants. Yeah, not even the Yankees did that. Led by the Thunder Twins, Buck Leonard and Josh Gibson. Both are in the Hall of Fame. Buck grew up in Rocky Mount, born in 1907. At the time, Rocky Mount was a segregated southern town. His mama, they had 5 kids. The mama was very particular about, as Buck said, home stuff. And she made sure the children swept the yard every Friday. Every kid had a chore. Buck's chore was to go around town, hook a wagon to the family goat, and go around town, find victuals for the pigs. The daddy was a fireman for Atlantic Coast Railroad. A fireman was the guy who made sure the boilers in the trains were stoked. Atlantic Coast Railroad at the time was a major railroad. It had a spider web of lines throughout the southeast. It built a shop, a repair yard, the Emerson Shops, in Rocky Mount, and that's where the daddy worked. Daddy died in 1919 from probably the Spanish flu epidemic. Buck, being the oldest of the 5 children, had to find a job. So he worked in a textile plant, he shined shoes. He graduated, black schools only went to the 10th grade. So at 10th grade, his schooling was over. When he was 52 years old, he got his high school diploma through a GED program. That's the Emerson Shops. They're gone now. They were torn down in the early 2000s. I don't know what's there now, but that's the old Emerson. But it put Rocky Mount on the map. And Rocky Mount was a textile tobacco town, and when the shops opened and employed 2,500 people at their height, it was by far the biggest employer in town, and employed a lot of black people. And that's where Buck finally went to work, and he thought he'd be like his daddy and spend his life in the railroads. Well, Depression, 1932, he lost his job. His only other marketable skill in a white world was baseball. He had played in school and played for some semi-pro teams in the area. And so he said, well, this is it. So he took off, played for teams in Maryland and New Jersey, and ended up in New York, playing for the Brooklyn Elite Giants, a black team. At one time, they were a Negro Leagues team, but when Buck got there, the team was on a decline. So they were no longer in a recognized league. But a guy tending bar named Bullet Joe Wood, who was in the Hall of Fame, a great Negro Leagues pitcher, saw Buck play. And Wood pitched for the Grays. He informed the Gray owner, Cumberland Posey, one of the great pioneers in black baseball. Posey came from a very wealthy black family in Pennsylvania. His daddy owned a steel mill. Homestead, where the Grays were located, was a gritty steel town just outside of Pittsburgh. Now it's part of Pittsburgh, but at the time it was just outside of Pittsburgh. The daddy owned a steel mill. He owned a boat works. I think he was the first licensed black riverboat captain in America. So daddy had money, and he helped the son, who was a very fine basketball player, helped the son buy the Homestead Grays. The Grays were, when Posey bought them, here's Buck. When Posey bought them, The Grays were a semi-pro team of some local renown, but nothing, well, that wasn't good enough for Cum. So he very purposely stayed out, kept his team out of the organized black leagues so he can wantonly raid their rosters. And that's what he did. At one time, 9 Hall of Famers played for Cum Posey. And they made the Boston Grays one of the most powerful baseball teams that ever played. And this guy was one of the reasons. He and Josh Gibson. You know, when Cum saw him play, he invited him to Pittsburgh. So Posey arrives in 1933, 34, 10th grade education, penniless. But he impressed Cum. He was a gentleman. He was level-headed. He played first base flawlessly. Hit ferocious line drives. Cum made him captain of the team. And for the 9 years that Buck played for the Grays, he was the captain. And they won 8 of those pennants with Buck at first base. Jackie Robinson, he's wearing the jersey. Jackie Robinson was signed by the Dodgers in '45. The color line was broken. Pretty soon, any black player in the Negro Leagues that was any good at all was signed by white teams. And that was the end of the Negro Leagues. They played their last game in 1950, and the leagues disbanded. Cleveland Indians offered Buck a contract, but Buck said, I'm 45 years old, who am I kidding? So he lost his chance to play in the white major leagues. Monty Irvin, he played in the black Negro Leagues, was one of those who made the crossover to, they called Buck, in the black newspapers, they called him the Black Lou Gehrig. Lou Gehrig being, of course, the great Yankee first baseman. Monty Irvin said that if they had allowed this guy to play in the white leagues, they might have called Lou Gehrig the Black Buck Leonard. He is by far, in my opinion, the best offensive player that North Carolina has produced. Luke Appling, I noted, was the best in the white leagues. He's not, as I said, he's from High Point. He's not a coastal North Carolinian, but Luke Appling was, I'll tell you a quick story about Luke. They called him Old Aches and Pains because he was a hypochondriac. He complained about everything, bursitis, a bad back, a bad knee, a bum shoulder. But he suited up every day, played for 22 years, missed 6 weeks because he broke a leg. In fact, when he broke his leg sliding into second base, his manager ran out there and he's writhing on the ground, and his manager says, "Get up, you bum." And he said, no, I think I really broke my leg. And he was out for 6 weeks, and that was the only injury he sustained throughout his career. But he had this uncanny ability to foul off pitches, 15, 16, 17 in a row, until he could get a pitch that he could hit. 1932, during the Depression, he played for the Chicago White Sox. A terrible team through most of their history. Absolutely awful back then. Charles Comiskey was the owner. A terrible cheapskate. So cheap, in fact, that he forced the players to do their own laundry. So Appling, a charity, wanted to auction off some balls that he signed. He was the best player on the team by far. So a local charity wanted to auction off some balls. So Appling went to Comiskey and asked for 4 or 5 balls that he can sign and give to this charity. And Comiskey said, "Are you nuts? This is the Depression. Those balls cost $2 a piece." So Luke bought 5 balls, signed them, gave them to the charity. That game, these are all day games. That day, that game at Comiskey Park, He was the leadoff batter. He got up, fouled off 20 pitches,
Oh, my goodness.
20 in a row. Stepped out of the box, took a step towards the owner's box, which was right next to the dugout, and said, "That's $40 and I'm just getting started." But that was Luke Appley.
So the balls were $2 a piece.
$2 a piece. Yeah, yeah. Often asked who the best pitchers are. Anybody recognize this guy?
Not Koufax.
No, it's Gaylord Perry.
Okay.
Gaylord Perry came from Griffin's, which is outside Williamston, also Eastern North Carolinian. His brother Jim, his older brother Jim, was actually, in my opinion, a better pitcher. Gaylord won 300 games, 303 games. Jim Perry won 213 and didn't cheat. This guy cheated. He cheated his way into the Hall of Fame. He mastered one pitch, the spitball, which had been illegal for 50 years by the time he started throwing it in 1964 to save his career. He was a young pitcher heading nowhere except back down to the minors. A pitcher on the team had taught him how to throw the spitball. He had played with it in the bullpen. And
Would you tell us exactly what a spitball is?
Spitball is when you doctor the baseball with some kind of substance. You can use spit, Vaseline, KY jelly. He used all kinds of substances. And it makes the ball do very odd things. It actually is, it comes in like a fastball, and then if it's controlled well, and he was a master at it, it would sink very quickly. And so he used the spitball almost exclusively from 1964 for the next 18 years. Won 303 games, got into the Hall of Fame. You know, and as I note in the book, he found good company when he got into the Hall, because the place is full of cheaters. You know, John McGraw, when he was a player at third base, used to grab a runner going around third base, he'd grab his shirt tail, so trip him. You know, cheating was a way to get an advantage. But there was no one more artful than you should go to YouTube and look him up and see his pitching motion. He had this, he touches cap, he touches belt, he touches arm, he touches elbow. It was all deception of you know, keeping the umpire and the players guessing as to whether he was loading up the ball or not. So he had this elaborate, which he would practice in front of a mirror. He had this elaborate motion that was part of the deception. And no one ever caught him. He was the most scrutinized pitcher in baseball history. They all but undressed him on the mound. They would look in his ears, they'd look in his cap, they'd look in his belt. They never found where he was hiding whatever it was he was putting on the baseball. But it was well known. There was no secret about it. And he was always very coy and cagey about it. He wrote a book, Me and the Spitball. In the middle of his career, he publishes an autobiography. But always said he reformed, he doesn't do it anymore. Yeah, he was a master at that one pitch, and it took him to the Hall of Fame.
So doesn't the ball end up right in front of the umpire?
Yes,
every
yes.
pitch?
Yeah, but what the catcher will do, will rub it in the dirt. If the ball, if the batter says, "I want to see that ball," well, the catcher say, "Okay," but he's rubbed it in the dirt. Yeah. It got so bad, actually, that catchers didn't really want to pick up the ball and throw it back to them, so they'd walk out to the pitcher's mound and hand them the ball.
That's legal. The catcher can walk the ball out.
Oh yeah. Catcher can walk the ball
day.
out. To this day, yes, yeah. The catcher can walk the ball out. Yeah, it was so nasty that catchers didn't even want to pick up the ball and throw it back to him. So they'd walk it back to the pitcher's mound. This guy, in my opinion,
Projects.
is the best pitcher North Carolina has produced. Another coastal North Carolinian.
Catfish hunt.
Catfish hunt.
Jimmy Hunter, please, please.
Not catfish?
In Hertford and Perquimans County, no one called him Catfish. That was a nickname that one of his owners, Finley, Charles Finley, owner of the A's, gave him because he thought a Southern boy who liked to fish and hunt would call him Catfish. So yeah, in fact, that's, you know, if you look in the baseball references, yeah, it's Jim Catfish Hunter.
Yeah.
But no one in Perquimans County called him Catfish. When he was inducted in the Hall of Fame in 88, late 80s,
Frank, which high school did he attend?
he attended Perquimans High School. Yeah, he went straight from high school to the major leagues. One of the few people to do that. He was that good. Yeah, when he was inducted in the Hall of Fame, I went to Hertford and did a profile on him, and talked to people who knew him since he was a kid, and no one called him. He was Jimmy, and he was probably he was a farmer. His daddy was a farmer, and throughout his life, he farmed. He was an active farmer. He wasn't. He didn't play at it. He actually did farm, everyone in town he was always Jimmy. It was, you know, whatever fame he achieved and the money never changed him. You know, he always cared about, you know, making sure the widow had enough wood in for the winter, he was highly regarded. They put up a plaque when you go into Hertford now. There's the home of Catfish Hunter, which I think he was probably prouder of than induction into the Hall of Fame. He was what we call in the game a money pitcher. If you were a manager and you had to win the game today, that's the guy you wanted on the mound.
Is there a certain pitch he was known for?
No, he was a bulldog. He was tenacious. He had a good assortment of pitches, he just had the mentality of he never rattled. You put him in a pressure situation, he responded. He was the He was, you know, the recognized leader of the Oakland A's, a very fractious group that included people like Reggie Jackson and Joe Rudy, and they won. Sal Bando. They won 3 consecutive world championships in 1974 when he made $100,000. He was one of the highest paid players in baseball in 1974, and he made $100,000.
That was a lot of money.
That was a lot of money. Now, his deal with Charlie Finley and the Oakland A's was that half of his salary was to be deferred and put into an annuity. Well, Finley was also a cheapskate, and that meant that Finley would have to pay the taxes on $50,000, so he didn't do it. After the 1974 World Series, Jimmy filed a grievance. Now, the Baseball Players Association was just a couple of years old. It was not the powerful organization it is now. There is a clause, and has been since 1879, called the reserve clause in every standard baseball contract. And that meant that you belonged to that team for the rest of your playing life. You were signed on annual contracts. You had no negotiating right. The only thing you could do was not play. That was the only tactic you could employ. If they offered you a contract, you didn't like it, you would be a holdout, and you would get branded in the press for being a holdout, and eventually you'd come around to the terms that whatever the owner wanted to offer you. You had absolutely no influence on where you played or how much you made. Well, that was the system he played under, and had been in place since 1879. He filed a grievance because Finley had broken the terms of the contract. He had not put the $50,000 in the annuity. The new union had just signed the first bargaining agreement with the owners the year before. And there was a stipulation in that contract that these kinds of disputes would be settled by an independent arbiter. He went to the arbiter. The arbiter declared Jim Hunter, the best pitcher in baseball, a free agent. That was on December 3rd, 1974. He was making $100,000. The Cleveland Indians, the next day on December 4th, made the first offer, $1 million. It shocked everyone in baseball. For the next 3 weeks, Jim Hunter would make the trip from Hertford to his lawyer's office in Ahoskie, and every day the offer was going up $100,000. $100,000. Finally, on New Year's Eve, he told his wife, Helen, I've had enough. This has gone on long enough. I missed deer season, and I'm going to sign today. On his way to Ahoskie, he pulled into the Thunderbird Hotel to have a cup of coffee with his old friend Clyde Klutz. Clyde Klutz is another North Carolinian from Lenore, North Carolina, was a catcher. Became a scout when he retired, and scouted Jim Hunter when he was a high school kid. Went to his high school game, saw him pitch 5 no-hitters his senior year. Hunter was when he was a kid, was in a hunting accident. On Thanksgiving, he and his brother went hunting. The brother's shotgun accidentally discharged. He ended up with shotgun pellets in his foot, and everybody said that was it. That was the end of his career. Klutz says, no, this kid will pull through this, and he told Finley that he's going to keep pursuing this kid. He'd show up every day at the Hunter house. Jim told me, yeah, he qualified for being in the family portrait by that time. I mean, he'd stop and talk to the daddy in the field. He'd stop and talk to mama in the kitchen, have a cup of coffee, a piece of pie, and a bond developed. So when it came time for Hunter to finally make up his mind, Clyde Klutz was scouting for the New York Yankees. And the Yankees had made an offer, but it wasn't competitive. So Clyde told his old young friend here, what's it going to take to make you a Yankee? So over the next 2 hours, over a couple of cups of coffee, they came to an agreement. $3.5 million over 5 years. Shocking Today it's nothing. Now today that's what a rookie sitting on the bench makes. But $3.5 million, from $100,000 to $3.5 million. And he ended his career as a Yankee, helped them win their first pennant in 15 or 16 years. George Steinbrenner, the Yankee owner, always said that it was money well spent. He taught us how to win. And so then he said, but you know, the Yankees abused him pretty terribly. He pitched 300 innings for 2 seasons, and that marvelous right arm just gave out. And he always said that when it came time to go, he wasn't hanging around, he was going. So he retired, went back to Hertford, to the farm with the ducks painted on the mailbox, and there was a big painted ball on the side of the barn. The staircase was made up of old baseball bats, the banister on the staircase. Then he went out hunting one cold day, and his right arm got numb, and he thought it was just a cold. He was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease, and died a year later. But yeah, he is truly one of the great North Carolina baseball figures, and didn't cheat his way into the Hall of Fame.
Frank, 300 innings, can you translate into how many games that is?
Well, no, I mean, if a game is 9 innings,
Right.
so you can do the math.
Right there.
But
No starts, 30,
yeah,
35
yeah.
or
they
so.
pitched every fourth
4
game.
days.
Right, that's
Yeah,
right.
It's more like,
Which was a
It's
lot
more like-
back then,
It's
wasn't
more
it?
like
Forty
46
some
starts,
starts
every
season.
fourth game you pitched, you
Right.
had a
Yeah.
4-man rotation.
Right.
Gotcha.
That's right. That's right. You had a 4-man rotation.
300 was pretty common back in the
It was.
60s, yeah.
It was.
Yeah, that was the mark of a workhorse pitcher, 300 innings. But the one thing I learned doing this research is that every pitcher gets hurt. Every pitcher gets hurt. It's not a natural motion. You do it long enough with the stress and the contortions that are required to throw curveballs and sliders. The human arm is not designed to take that kind of punishment over a long term. It is rare. It is the rare, Gaylord Perry was one of them. It is the rare pitcher who does not get hurt.
Is it worse now,
I think it is, well, it used to be shoulder injuries. But the shoulder, now it's elbows, because the shoulder, you can strengthen the muscles around the shoulder. So they developed exercises and routines that minimize the shoulder injuries, but then it transferred it to the next joint down the line, which is the elbow, which is just has tendons. There's nothing you can do physically. There's no exercises you can do to strengthen an elbow. So yeah, now it's elbows, and because of youth baseball, where you have these traveling teams, and you have 10 and 12-year-olds, it's a terrible thing, and it ought to stop. Someone should put a stop to it. You have these kids who are considered, major league talents, whether you can tell that when you're 12 years old. But the parents pay big money to put them on these traveling teams, and they play 6-7 months a year all over the country. And orthopedic surgeons say they see 15-year-olds, 14-year-olds now coming in to get what's called Tommy John surgery after a pitcher, a Dodger pitcher, who was the first pitcher to have it. So the procedure now is named after him. But it has rejuvenated a lot of careers. But and pitchers can come back from one Tommy John. Now you can get 2 or 3. And so, but every pitcher gets hurt. It's just the way it is, and it's always been that way. I laugh now when I see, Nolan Ryan was one of those who was blessed. He was blessed with a right arm, and he never got hurt. And when he became the owner of the team in Texas, he used to preach that, well, what we need is just to keep working. They don't get enough work. Well, that's foolish. It's absolutely foolish. And it didn't work. His pitcher still got hurt because it's just not a natural motion. And you do it over a long enough time, yeah, you're going to get hurt.
Mind if I say, today too, the thing is they're throwing a lot harder than they did even now. And the spin
95
rates,
mile an hour
spin
fastball,
rates,
yeah.
it's like,
Right.
and
Right.
you watch it, even the great teams, the teams are going through
Oh, they go.
1,000 pitchers
Yes.
a year.
And now you got 5-man rotations, so you get an extra day,
6-man rotation.
and sometimes
6.
6.
But the thing about all of that is that Koufax pitched 27 complete games. Now the leader has 1 complete
Right.
game.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
unheard of, a complete
To
game.
have
Yeah,
a
it
complete
is.
game anymore.
Yeah. No
And
one.
there's less than like a couple dozen across all the major leagues.
Yeah, the complete game is about as rare as a perfect game. It really is. Yeah, I mean, no one throws a complete game anymore.
The no-hitter?
Well, yeah, it's pretty rare. It's pretty rare. In fact, there have been numerous occasions where, in fact, it happened this year, where there was a combined no-hitter because they won't even let the starter finish the game. So he leaves in the 7th inning, and in this case, the reliever pitched the final 3 innings and no hit. So they got to combine.
No hitter, you passed 100 pitches.
You're coming out
You
regardless.
typically
Right,
they're
right,
falling you.
right.
Because they know if they leave. I mean, once in a while you'll see this some guy will throw no hitter, and then a few weeks later, they think he'll be hurt. You know, so it's like,
So despite the fact that the starting pitcher was pitching a no-hitter, he was pulled
Yeah.
because of the number of pitches he
Yes.
threw.
Yeah.
Right. That's exactly
They
right.
didn't have many pitchers. I mean, what, the Dodgers had one reliever,
Yeah,
Aronowski.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So you had 4 starters and 1 reliever.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, a modern team now will carry 14 or 15 pitchers.
Yeah.
Well, you got a 25-man roster. So
It's 26 now.
oh, is it 26? Okay, so that means you got your 8 position players, you got 14 pitchers. That leaves you like 2 or 3 guys. You need a second catcher.
Is they actually have a rule. You have to carry, I think it's 13. You can't carry 14 pitchers. You have to carry 13. You have to carry 13 players.
Okay.
I think it's somewhere there. It's right around there.
So there's unlike teams in the past where they'd have their starting rotation. Bullpen may have 3, and they were sore on pitchers. The bullpen was these guys on the way down or kids trying to prove themselves. There was no one you can rely on, and will accept. There were, it started to change in the late 50s, and there were 2 North Carolinians who were part of that change. The main one being Hoyt Wilhelm, and he's in the Hall of Fame. He's from Mecklenburg County. He was by far the stellar reliever. There were no closers. Today we have closers. The pitcher pitches 1 inning. That was unheard of. Even Wilhelm would pitch 3 or 4 innings. But he was a guy in a bullpen that the manager could rely on. If he had to preserve a lead, you call in Hoyt. That was unheard of. You just never had that before. So that and Wilhelm is in the Hall of Fame because of his relief work. This guy isn't in the Hall of Fame, but he's one of my favorite players. Gus Britton. He was one mean SOB. One of his teammates in the 1930s was on a train that got in there. That hit a car at a crossing. And a reporter asked him, well, what was it like? And he said, it sounded like we were dragging Gus Britton under the train. He was from Wilmington. He was a catcher. And he liked to fight. Back then, you could make a career playing in the minor leagues. You can't now. But back then, you could make a pretty good living playing in the minor league. And Gus did. But wherever he went, from Topeka, Kansas, to Richmond, Virginia, from Montreal down to Tampa, Florida, he left a string of fines and banishments, and because he liked to fight. Well, he's playing for the Durham Bulls in 1937, and the Bulls manager was tired of this, and he wanted to get rid of him. Charlie Dressen, who was the manager of the Cincinnati Reds, thought he needed an enforcer, that his batters were getting thrown at a lot, and he wanted a guy like in hockey. He wanted that enforcer guy. So he signs Gus. Well, it didn't turn out exactly the way Charlie thought. Gus got into 1 game in 1937 and 1 fight. The fight, though, happened to be against the Reds' star pitcher, who himself was a hothead. And no one knows why it started, but it started in the bullpen, migrated into the dugout, where the pitcher actually hit Gus in the face with a catcher's mask. Didn't deter Gus, and it took the rest of the team to pull Gus off the pitcher. Well, that was the end, and so Dressen called him my fighting bullpen catcher. Well, Dressen let him go. He came back to the minors. Ended his career as the manager of the Wilmington team. And it was in the 1940s, 42, 43. They were playing a team from Clinton. Clinton used to have and these were semi-pro teams. back then there were a lot of minor league teams, and they were classified from D all the way up to, didn't have AAA, but AA was considered one step back down from the majors. Wilmington was a D team. Clinton was a D team. The Clinton team was managed by Van Lingo Mungo, a Brooklyn Dodger of the 1930s when the Dodgers were terrible, but Mungo was their best player and a fan favorite. Well, he's managing the Clinton team. He's from South Carolina, and he's managing the Clinton team. Well, there was play at second base that Gus didn't like, and he ran out there and cussed a little bit, kicked some dirt, and went back to the dugout. Now, it's a pretty minor outburst by Gus's standards. Well, he's catching. He was a player manager, so he crouches behind the plate, and here comes Van Lingo Mungo, who was also playing as well as managing as the next batter. Well, words were exchanged, and pretty soon there's a true brawl. The people pour out of the stands. Mungo and the second base umpire ended up in the hospital. Gus was banned. At the time, he was actually charged, a criminal charge, and the judge, which was allowed at the time, as his fine, the judge put him on the disqualified list. He was banned. Could not take part in baseball. He's one of 3 North Carolinians who at some point in their careers were banned from baseball. 2 others were for financial reasons, because back in the early days of baseball, if a manager didn't like the way you looked or thought you drank too much, which was often the case, they could put you on the disqualified list. Gus is the only one who got there because of his behavior. And so the ban lasted about 3 years, and finally was lifted, but by then he was too old and too much of a handful, and no one would mess with him. So he opened up a bar in Wrightsville Beach called Shooney's Place. His nickname, his middle name was Gus Schuster Britton, and they called him Shooney for his middle name. So he opens this bar in Wrightsville Beach called Shooney's Place, and he used to say something about you can get a seat as long as you got a bathing suit on. That was the only qualification. You had to wear a bathing suit. And and then he died running Shooney's Place. But yeah, he typifies baseball of that era, where it was no holds barred. They did things that you just wouldn't. Drinking was epidemic. They played day games, so they had all night, and these were young men. Even if they were married, the wives were at home, and so at night, they did what young men did. They got drunk and raised hell, and it led to shortened careers and shortened lives. This guy right here, who saw Field of Dreams?
Yes.
Field of Dreams. Remember, there's a character in Field of Dreams called Moonlight Graham. That's him right there, from Fayetteville. As far as I can tell, no one ever called him Moonlight while he was alive.
Really?
Yeah. No, I can find no evidence of the nickname Moonlight. Why it appeared in a Baseball Digest, I have no idea. But that Baseball Digest was given to the author who wrote Kinsella. He got it as a Christmas gift, saw this player named Moonlight Graham, and was writing a novel about Shoeless Joe Jackson, who was a Chicago White Sox player who was one of the 8 who were thrown out of baseball for allegedly fixing the 1919 World Series. So from that novel, the movie Field of Dreams was made. Burt Lancaster plays Moonlight in the movie. And
Call him Doc?
he was a doctor. He was.
No, I mean, was that his name?
No, he became a doctor very late in his baseball career.
Okay.
He only played one game he didn't even get an at bat. He played in the field for one game for the New York Giants, and finished his medical training and became a doctor in town northern Minnesota for 50 years. Was the town's trusted doctor for 50 years. And then this movie comes out, and all of a sudden he achieves this post-mortem fame. And now there's a Moonlight Graham Festival in Minnesota. There's a Moonlight Graham Scholarship Fund, but nobody called him Moonlight, as far as I could tell, while he was alive. He had a very distinguished family. His brother was Frank Porter Graham, who was an educator at UNC and congressman or senator.
President of the university.
And president of the university. That was his brother. His father was a big advocate of public schools, started the public school system in Fayetteville, and then moved to Charlotte to start the school system there. So he came from this very distinguished family of educators. Went to UNC, that's the UNC baseball team in 1900. Was a star player on the UNC team. Was very fast, was an outfielder. Was very fast, and there's speculation that Moonlight came from his speed, but I could find no idiom or that connotes Moonlight with foot speed. So where it came from is a mystery, but yeah, he, as I said, he played one game in the major leagues and didn't even get to bat. He was a defensive replacement, but certainly there were 37 or 38 players similarly who played one inning in a defensive, and their names are forgettable. You've not heard of any of them. He's the exception, Moonlight Graham. I think that's it.
What's the famous medical center in Minnesota?
The Mayo Clinic.
Mayo, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
They have a museum inside the Mayo.
Yeah, he used to do, he did a breakthrough study on childhood hypertension when he was a doctor through the Mayo Clinic. And so, yeah, he was recognized as, he was what we all expect of the town doctor. He was very kind. He'd carry apples in his pockets that he'd give to kids.
The town he was in Minnesota?
Yeah, it's in the Iron Range.
Duluth or?
No, it wasn't a big town. It was a mining town, and in fact, he.
How did he end up there?
Well, he was interning at a hospital in Chicago, and he went to a conference in the Mayo Clinic, and he heard that this town had just had a fire. The fire had burned 2/3 of the town. And they rebuilt the hospital, and they were looking for doctors. He phoned in his resignation at the hospital in Chicago, got on a train, and it was the last stop on the line, steps out into town, starts with an H.
Okay. Hibbing?
No.
Hickory.
No. I'd have to look it up. But it was the last stop on the line. He gets out, and in his, he doesn't know anybody, walks up to the hospital, says, "Here, I'm your new doctor," and was considered something of an oddball at first, but no, he 50 years, he was the town doctor, birthed babies and coaxed them through plagues and comforted them at death, and became highly respected, and then in death becomes this baseball immortal. So
Was his wife's name Alicia?
I don't know that.
Because
I'd have to
in the
look.
movie, there's that line where he says, Alicia will think I've got a girlfriend, he says.
Oh, okay,
Alicia will
okay,
think
okay,
I've got a girlfriend.
yeah,
I was wondering
yeah.
if that was actually his.
I'd have to look. I don't remember.
It's Chisholm, that's Minnesota.
Chisholm, that's it. Okay, Chisholm, Minnesota. Right.
Yeah, right.
Well, just an overall comment very quickly about all the fighting and cheating and all that stuff years and years ago. I mean, it was just accepted socially. It was
Yes.
accepted and expected, right?
Yeah. After the 1919, after the debacle, and there's a lot of uncertainty about exactly what happened
Right.
in the 1919 World Series, but certainly the suspicion was that players colluded to throw the series, again, because these were the White Sox, and again, Comiskey was a cheap SOB,
Yeah.
and he didn't pay him anything, and so,
Baseball field named after him?
yes, Comiskey Park, yeah, it no longer,
He owned the stadium.
yeah,
He owns it.
yeah.
Okay, that's why it's named after
It no
him.
longer exists, but after that,
Right.
baseball, they used to look the other way with all the
Yep.
gambling particularly.
Okay.
Because it was rampant. I mean, the bookies would roam the crowd giving odds, and it was, no one liked it, but it was sort of, you put up with it. But after 1919, they couldn't.
Right.
So the owners hired Kennesaw Mountain Landis as the first baseball commissioner, and you should look up a picture of Kennesaw Mountain. He had this shock of white hair. Had this very stern demeanor, stiff starch collars, which made you, the whole appearance was, this guy was not somebody you mess with, and he wasn't. So he threw 9 guys out, whether they did any, there was a trial. There was a grand jury investigation in Chicago. They were tried and found not guilty. When they hired Kennesaw Mountain, they gave him absolute authority. He could do whatever he wanted, and there was no court of appeals. And so regardless of what a legal court said, he threw these guys out to send a message. And gambling was never an issue again until Pete Rose came along. But gambling was never, open gambling was never an issue again in baseball. Because of Landis and what he did. He did have a soft spot. He was a federal judge before baseball, and he was a trust-busting judge. And he had a soft spot for the underprivileged and those who didn't have power. And there were several North Carolinian players. Back then in the minor leagues, there were these rules that were sort of wink and a nod, and teams would stockpile players in their minor league systems, and you could play in the minor leagues for years and never get an opportunity to play in the majors. And when the minor leagues became subsidiaries of a major league team, it used to be until the 30s, minor league teams were independently owned teams. Then when Branch Rickey got involved and organized the minor leagues under the banner of the major league team, so a major league team could have 10 or 15 minor league affiliates, and it would stockpile players so another team couldn't get them in their minor league system.
To be in training, so to speak.
Yeah, but they had no intention of raising these kids up through the system.
But didn't the Yankees have a major league affiliate, Kansas City? They
Oh, well, yeah,
they
right,
owned
yeah,
Kansas City.
yeah.
They kept sending players to Kansas City and bringing them up.
That's right. But Landis didn't like that. And so players knew, as a last resort, they could appeal to Landis. And there were a number of instances where he ruled in favor of the player. And again, there was no recourse. Whatever he said went. And so there are a number of North Carolinians who were stuck in the minor leagues, appealed to Landis, and were made free agents.
So if you want a good pitcher, you don't want a kid that went through
No.
that farm or whatever they're calling those travel
No,
teams,
yeah.
because they'll be half worn out.
They will have pitched so many innings in that arm at a time when the arm is really still developing.
Right.
It's a terrible. There's a book written about this called The Arm, and it lays this all out. It's a terrible indictment.
And what's the solution? Is it to count the number of pitches?
Well, they do that now. Yeah, they do
It's
that.
restricted.
Yeah, it's restricted now, and it's even restricted there. But even if you limit the kid to 40 pitches, he's been pitching since he was 12 years old.
So lifetime.
And so that accumulated wear on the arm, that adds up over time, and it really is a system that, if we want to limit the injuries to pitchers, someone has. But there's money to be made.
I was gonna say, I don't get the impression that they care about limit.
No, they don't.
limiting the
They don't.
injuries is not the
No,
priority.
no.
Because it seems to me there's a bottomless pool
Yes,
of pitchers.
yes.
You've got,
And-
you've got all these youth leagues, and now with the colleges and the size rosters that the colleges are carrying, it seems like the major leagues, they've got an endless supply.
Right.
And so they'll just burn through them. They don't-
Right, right.
Well, I
Or
say
am I wrong
they
about
take the
that?
risk. There's even now, there's players that are drafted that are injured. And
Yeah.
they sign players knowing that they need surgery.
Right.
And we'll say, you still have to hit that peak of whether it's high school ball or college ball that you can pitch. The assessment that you'll be a major league pitcher. It's an interesting time right now, but they just, and I think the teams know now that they can't, we talk about having 5 starting pitchers and 8 relievers, but they really have, at their AAA team, they've got another same number of pitchers there. That a lot of those guys are going to pitch in the major leagues each season because they're going back and forth.
Right.
I mean, I happen to follow. I was born and raised in Baltimore, so I'm an Orioles fan. The Orioles have already went through like 46 players have already come back and forth, and halfway through the season.
Braves
because-
season has been the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so-
yeah, yeah. It's now the way it's all changed. I mean, the game and I find it's hard for me as a Yankee fan growing up. Back in the day when it was still okay to throw at somebody, and you still slid hard into second base, and no one got too upset about it. It's now so changed that I have a hard time watching a full game. I really do, and I sometimes have to force myself, or I'll watch the first 2 or 3 innings, cut it off, check the score. If it's okay, if it's interesting, I'll go back and watch the last 2 or 3 innings. But and I'm a dedicated baseball fan, but it's now it's changed so much. Yeah, it's still essentially the same game. Yeah, it's 3 bases, and whoever scores the most runs at the end wins. But they got time clocks and the way they play extra inning games, and we'll never see the Gaylord Perry when Perry in 1964, he was a nobody pitcher on the Giants. The Giants were playing the Mets in New York. It was the 16th inning. Alvin Dark, who was the Giants manager, was out of pitchers. There was nobody left except the bum, Gaylord Perry. So he sends Perry in on the 16th inning. Perry gets through the 16th. On the 17th, two batters, first batter walks, next guy gets a hit, you got first and second. Tom Haller, who was the catcher, goes up to the mound, walks out to the mound and says, Gaylord, if you're going to do it, now's the time. Gaylord loaded up his first pitch. got out of the inning. The Giants won in the 22nd inning, and Gaylord got the victory. We won't see that again. That'll never happen again. Another Gaylord story, which I just thought of. He was a terrible hitter, awful hitter. Most pitchers are bad hitters, but Gaylord was particularly bad. Alvin Dark said, "Guy will walk on the moon before this guy hits a home run." Guess what happened?
He walked on the moon.
Apollo lands. 3 hours later, 300,000 miles away, in the 5th inning at Candlestick Park,
No, he didn't.
Gaylord Perry hit his first home run.